Hello and welcome to another gameplay video on the official MTG Arena channel. Today we've got a pretty spicy historic deck in store for you, featuring 4 copies of Minion of the Mighty, and this card is capable of killing the opponent as early as turn 2, making it the fastest combo deck in the format. And nowadays the format is pretty fast, a lot of non-interactive combo decks, playing the Anvil, playing Ashnod's Altar, that were introduced in the Brothers War. So we've got a deck that's capable of killing those combo decks even faster, although it does need to mulligan quite aggressively to find a copy of Minion of the Mighty in its opening hand. This 1-mana 0/1 Kobold has Menace, and Pack Tactics says whenever the Minion of the Mighty attacks, if we attacked with creatures with total power 6 or greater this combat, we may put a dragon creature card from our hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. So we're not going to attack with Minion alongside some other creatures. Instead, we're going to try and increase its power using pump spells, and the best one we have available in Historic is Scale Up, single green for a sorcery that says until end of turn, target creature we control becomes a green worm with base power and toughness 6/4. So by itself, Scale Up can increase the minion's power up to 6. So now if we attack with our minion, it will enable Pack Tactics all by itself, and we can cheat some expensive dragons into play. And the best dragon we can put in play is usually a Terror of Mount Velos, 7-mana 5/5 with flying and double strike, and when it enters the battlefield, creatures we control gain a double strike until end of turn. So if we have a 6-powered minion, a 5-powered terror, and they both gain double strike, that's more than 20 damage, so that's how we can easily kill on turn 2. Now we have some other pump spells as well in case we don't draw our Scale Up, which will increase the minion's power by 3 each time. We've got Infuriate, +3/+2 at instant speed. Reckless Charge is a sorcery giving +3 power and haste until end of turn, can also be flashed back, so this can potentially set up a hasty minion out of nowhere to surprise kill the opponent. Then we've got 2 copies of Titan Strength, which also lets us scry 1, and Giant Growth, another classic, +3/+3 until end of turn, and then 2 copies of a Wild Shape, which has the added benefit of maybe protecting our minion from a removal spell, since we always have the option of turning it into a 1/3 turtle with hexproof until end of turn, but can also choose for a 3/3 Trampling Elephant as base power and toughness, and then a second pump spell will usually get it done. I'm only playing 2 copies, because if we draw multiple copies of Wild Shape, we're sometimes unable to actually get the minion to 6 power, because double Wild Shape still only makes a 3/3 Trampling Elephant, so we won't be able to get to the 6 power required, so that's why I'm only playing 2 copies of that one. And then the dragons we can put in play include our 4 copies of Terror. Then we've got 4 copies of Old Gnawbone, the 7/7 flyer, says whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, create that many treasure tokens. So if we can hit the opponent for 13 with Minion and Gnawbone, we'll make 13 treasures, which is usually enough to still play a few dragons from our hand afterwards, should we have any. And then 2 copies of Ancient Copper Dragon, same concept, a 6/5 flyer, and when it hits the opponent we get to roll a d20 and create a number of treasure tokens equal to the result. So that's usually worse than Old Gnawbone, but still pretty good at helping us empty our hand. And then we also have 2 copies of the Ancient Gold Dragon. This one doesn't make treasure, but makes 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature tokens with flying equal to the result of our d20 roll on a 7/10 flyer. And then finally 4 copies of Ziatora the Incinerator, which is a 6/6 flyer, saying at the beginning of our end step we may sacrifice another creature. When we do, Ziatora deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target, including the opponent directly. And then we also get to create 3 treasure tokens, so we can maybe sacrifice our Minion of the Mighty after having dealt 12 damage, so that's 18 damage total. We get to make 3 treasures. We still have a Ziatora in play. Maybe the opponent took 2 damage off their Shockland, like we have Stomping Ground, and that's enough to win the game on the spot. But sometimes it's also nice to play Ziatora after making treasures with a Gnawbone or Ancient Copper Dragon, so we can still add an extra dragon to the board and maybe finish the opponent off by sacrificing a slightly larger creature. And of course also plays well if we have any additional pump spells that we can cast to increase our power and increase our damage even in the second main phase. And yeah, that's basically our entire deck. Our mana base needs to have lots of red-green dual lands, so we can cast our minion with it, as well as potentially our green pump spells. So we really want that land to make both red and green. So we've got a full set of Stomping Ground and the new Carplusan Forest, and then 4 of the red-green pathway, not quite as good since we have to choose between red or green, and then the Temple of the Dragon Queen, also pretty good in a deck playing dragons, as it can make red or green mana and comes into play untapped without costing us any life. and then I've got a few basics, 2 mountains, and the channel lands, which we're usually just playing out as a land, but you never know, you could make some treasures and then still channel them. Now in the upcoming Explorer Anthology expansion, which is releasing on the 13th, we'll have access to Mana Confluence as an extra land, which will certainly make this deck as a land that can make any color, even if it costs us 1 life each time, since we just need that consistency in our mana base, and since we're killing on turn 2 sometimes, we don't care about taking a few points of damage. So yeah, that's our deck. I've always thought of this as kind of a meme deck, but after trying it out in the play queue, the results have been promising, so I'll be committing to 10 games on the ranked ladder now, and we'll see if it holds up. So let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. No minion means mulligan. Down to 5 we go. The lowest we can go and still potentially win on turn 2, I think, is 3. We need land, minion, scale up, and then draw into a big dragon. Still no minion. Alright. There we have it. And we have to return 4 cards, so sadly we don't have a red-green dual land that can play minion and scale up. We have to put 1 more card on the bottom, and I'm guessing Ancient Copper Dragon over a land. Although that does mean we need to draw both another dragon and a land. So maybe I'm more likely to draw a red-green dual land and just keep a no-lander here. Opponent on blue-red wizards. So they might have some removal, but we just gotta try. Pride Dragon, alright, that's promising. So if we draw a green source, we could actually go off. And there we have it. So, not quite lethal, but definitely puts us in a good position. Opponent's at 6. 8 treasures, so whatever dragon we draw, we can cast. And they need to deal with our copper dragon. Opponent goes digging with Opt. A bounce spell on dragons, not particularly effective since we can just replay it. And iteration, so opponent's gonna have to chump with his Pride Dragon. After keeping a no land hand, so yeah, the minion can be quite powerful. Had we top-decked another dragon, we would have been able to put it in play for free. Opponent chumps, no need to infuriate. Might have been worth it to keep the minion back, actually, in case we need a blocker for Channeler. Could use infuriate as kind of a combat trick as well. But at 17 life, I like my chances. Opponent passes, and a reckless charge, so I could cast it on minion, still flash it back, and have infuriate as protection from a burn spell. And our opponent explodes. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. No minion. Let's keep looking. Okay, still nothing, so it's not looking great for us here. Should I keep this and just keep a land? I think I would rather just mulligan and find a minion and put everything else on the bottom. So this one didn't go great for us. Need a lot of specific top decks. There's our dragon, so best case scenario, red-green dual land and scale up. Opponent with a turn 2 Spellbreaker, so Gruul aggro. It's going to present a pretty fast clock. And they could also have a Stomp to kill minion if we play it. Okay, Terror threatens to win the game as soon as we put it in play with minion, but we still need a land and pump spell. We probably have 2 more turns here. There's Infuriate, that's not a pump spell we wanted, so I think it's over now. And down to 5 we go. And just out of curiosity, we can see our next draw step, a Wild Shape. Alright, so if we found a dual land, we might have been able to get there eventually, but just a little too slow against the Gruul aggro deck. Opponent had the Stomp as well, so they had the Minion covered. Alright, GG's, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, and we're just looking for one more pump spell, and then we're good to go, so we'll keep. And then, depending on what our opponent's playing, we may or may not play Minion on turn 1. Okay, there's a Giant Growth, so we can combo on turn 2, assuming our opponent doesn't have a burn spell, which Blue-Red Wizards is somewhat likely to have. So I may wait one more turn, although the problem is if we need to use Giant Growth defensively, then we won't be able to necessarily get up to 6 power, but we're more likely to draw another pump spell than another minion. So yeah, close call. I think I'm gonna play it safe. And there's a Play with Fire, so glad we didn't go for it, since our opponent had the tools to kill minion. So best case scenario if they're out of burn spells in hand. Otherwise, we may need to use Giant Growth defensively, and then top deck another pump spell. Opponent with a Spikefield Hazard, sadly, so forced to Giant Growth. And then we've got a lot of top decks that still win us the game, or basically win us the game, since we can put in Old Gnawbone and then cast a Ziatora with all the treasure mana. And then Ziatora sacrifices either Minion or a Gnawbone. They could also leave Symmetry Sage back on defense to maybe block a dragon, but I don't know if they're necessarily winning the game if they play like that. So we get to untap, no pump spell, so we're just gonna have to pass here. Okay, it seems like our opponent may have disconnected. And Boseiju still doesn't quite do it. So I guess we'll pass it back. Still waiting for another pump effect. And our opponent explodes. Alright, I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Gotta take a mulligan. Still no minion. So let's go to 5. Make that 4, and this is a keep. And we've got Scale Up, Minion, although we're missing green mana. So between Gnawbone and Copper Dragon, probably prefer Gnawbone. And then Giant Growth can go, so yeah, this hand could get the job done. Could also keep an Ancient Gold Dragon instead. Sure. Maybe a bit more high variance. If we roll like a 1, we're gonna be pretty sad. Now we just need to have our opponent not kill our minion and top deck a green source. And our opponent appears to be on the Colorless Eggs Anvil combo deck, so they're not gonna have much in the way of interaction. Alright, Terror could present lethal if we find a green source. So opponent can potentially combo off on turn 3, but more likely on turn 4. 2 life can also make a difference. Sleeper Dart, also a good way to maybe keep a dragon tapped down for an extra turn. And there's another minion, so now if we find a green source we can put both dragons in play at once. Okay, so pretty tense moment here. If our pathway were Mana Confluence, which is coming out soon in the anthology, then we would have been able to scale up here. Opponent's got the Anvil, so they get to play a bunch of artifacts for free here. If those include Mind Stone, they can potentially play a second Anvil and keep comboing. Another Sleeper Dart's fine. Golden egg. Okay, let's top deck a green source. There we go. And this should be lethal. Attack with both. Get to trigger both of our minions. And then first we want to put in play Ancient Gold Dragon and then Terror, so the Ancient Gold Dragon also gains double strike. Just in case this weren't enough. Let's see how many fairy tokens we can make. And we rolled an 18, not bad. And our opponent explodes. So this was a mulligan to 4 that got there, and we get to rank up as well. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Let's mulligan. And this seems like a keep. And a pretty good one at that. So I guess we can keep Wild Shape and maybe a Reckless Charge. In case we want to set up Minion with haste out of nowhere. And then depending on the matchup, we can play Minion on turn 1 or we can wait. Alright, against the Steam Vents untapped, I guess we'll wait. And then I can play a tapped Temple without revealing any info, although Temple gives away a lot of information. So I'll play a Pathway on red and pass. Could just be a Consider end of turn, or an Opt. So now, ideally, we wait until we have 3 mana to play Minion, Charge, and Wild Shape or Titan Strength. And have our opponent tapped out. Soul Guide Lantern doesn't make a difference. Does potentially point towards a blue-red combo deck. So I'll play this on green, I suppose. Now, if our opponent has a bunch of mana up, we can't necessarily go for it, since we need 6 power to kind of enable our combo. But our opponent could respond to the second pump spell with a bit of interaction, and then we won't have Wild Shape as protection to potentially give hexproof. So I may wait another turn, and then hopefully get to 4 mana so we can double pump spell and hexproof. And our opponent doesn't seem to be doing much in the meantime, so probably fine to wait. Magma Opus, so it could be a Mythic's Mastery deck. And still nothing. So I could play Minion, have Wild Shape for protection, and just pass a turn here, and then next turn go for it. Or I can wait for lands, and then go for it in one big turn. Yeah, I would prefer for my opponent to be tapped out, in case they have multiple cheap interactive spells. And again, it's not like they're putting us under any pressure. If they tap out for Mythic's Mastery, then we're good to go. So their opponent gets to make a 4/4, draw 2 cards, deal 4 damage. But now they're tapped out, and pretty sure we can overpower them. Okay. So play Minion. And then we're forced to play Wild Shape preemptively, but that's okay. Attack for 6, put in all Gnawbone, make a bunch of treasure, and then Ziatora can maybe finish them off. Could also put in Ziatora and then sacrifice Minion for 6 damage, but might as well make more treasures in the process. And there we have it. Just had to wait for the right moment to go for it here. Ziatora sacrifices Minion. Has served us well. And 6 damage on the way out. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, and we've got a keeper. Just gotta hope our opponent can't remove our minion. Steam Vents is not a great sign, so maybe I should wait, just play Mountain and pass. And we've got a Reckless Charge for haste. Although next turn I can play Minion with Giant Growth backup. Turn to Arcanist. Arcanist is scary because they could potentially play Burn Spell twice in the same turn and still kill through a potential Pump Spell. And now with the third land, I think we can afford to wait. So, just gonna play Mountain and pass. And then next turn, hopefully our opponent stepped out and we can go Minion, a Reckless Charge, and Pump Spell. Opponent's likely to want to cast some spells to enable Arcanist here. So, expect him to be mostly tapped out. And our opponent doesn't necessarily know what we're up to yet. And our plan is for them to find out once it's too late. Opponent plays another Arcanist, okay. Is there another land? There is not, so I think we're in the clear. Reckless Charge plus Giant Growth. Put in Gnawbone. 13 damage, make 13 treasure. So we can still infuriate or Titan Strength if necessary. And at 19, I don't necessarily see our opponents killing us here, even with double Arcanist out, which could maybe replay a Burn Spell or two. If they try and kill Gnawbone, we can still grow it and increase its toughness somewhat. Opponent's got their own Reckless Charge, so now Arcanist could replay a more expensive spell. But so far just to consider and a Reckless Charge in the graveyard. And our opponent's just dead to the Gnawbone attacking. So best case scenario for our opponents, they have a Fading Hope to maybe bounce Gnawbone in our turn. Although we can still present 2 lethal threats by pumping the Minion of the Mighty. And they don't even have a land, so that should do it. And our opponent explodes. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. No minion. Let's mulligan. Keep going here. Still nothing. Alright, there we have a keeper. So return 3 cards. So at least a land. 1 terror can go. And then probably just another land here. And then we could draw a Scale Up to still win on turn 2. Otherwise we need a land plus Pump Spell. But I think that's still probably our best chance. Now question is whether we play Minion. And I think it's reasonable to play it since we could draw Scale Up to win next turn. Although there's always the risk of our opponent having removal in the meantime. Turn 1 planes, and there's Scale Up, okay. So turn 2 win, on a mulligan to 4. Assuming no interaction here. Easy peasy. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, and even though we're missing a dragon, I'm gonna keep this since we have Minion, good mana, multiple pump spells, including Hexproof and Haste. So this is a hand that could wait on playing Minion for a turn or 2, and still get there. Now of course a Thoughtseize could still disrupt our plan if we wait on playing Minion, but haven't seen too many Thoughtseize decks lately, so I'm gonna try and play around a removal spell instead. Turn 1 Forest, Elvish Mystic. And there's a dragon, so play Minion, have Wild Shape for Hexproof. And then next turn we should be able to cheat this Copper Dragon into play. And if our opponent is playing, let's say, an Elf Tribal deck, they shouldn't have too many reach creatures. Maybe a Sentinel that can get in the way of a Copper Dragon, but that's about it. Okay, opponent seems to pass. And scale up will make it even easier. And our opponent explodes. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, no minion. So let's go looking for one. There it is. And we've got a scale up to go with it. So what to put on the bottom? 2 cards need to go, so definitely a land. And then it's either another land or Giant Growth. Giant Growth could be a way to protect minion, in case we need to play it slow against the burn spell. So probably okay to bottom another land, and then we should have slightly more lands than pump spells. Although we could just play minion on turn 1, and then next turn go for it already. Yeah, it's a little bit risky, but I think it's fine. Opponent's got a very small window to disrupt us. Uh-oh, untapped red source. Does not bode well. Although I feel like if they had removal, they should have gone for it right away. Now we could play it safe, pass with Giant Growth up, so our opponent doesn't get a chance to respond to scale up with a burn spell. If our opponent's playing Shadow Skull Smashing, they might be a Charbelcher deck, which I guess does run Spikefield Hazard. So they may not want to necessarily cast a Spikefield since they need it as a land, but in a pinch they might kill our minion here. So I guess we'll wait. If our opponent's on Charbelcher, then they should only be able to kill us around turn 4. So we have a bit more time. And we just need another green source to play it safe. Another minion, I guess, will also do it. To an extent, I guess it could still kill the minion we try and target with our pump spell. Opponent could also be running the 3 damage sweeper, in which case going for minion does not work out. If I play second minion and then next turn go for it, I could put both of my dragons in play to guarantee lethal. As is, we're not necessarily there with putting a Gnawbone or Gold Dragon into play. But yeah, I've got a sneaking suspicion that our opponent could be holding Brotherhood's Ends, and in that case, I don't want to play another minion. Opponent passes, so they probably have a Spikefield Hazard in hand that they need to keep up as interaction as opposed to being able to play it as a land. So now both decks are kind of in an awkward spot. We drew another Giant Growth, so I still don't feel like I can commit another minion. So I'm just going to pass. Opponent could Hazard end of turn, maybe. And then we'll Giant Growth or Magma Opus to make a treasure. So our opponent could kill us next turn if they have a Belcher with Ironcrag Feet. But that would also require an untapped land, which they didn't have. So the window is closing. We found another minion. So I think I just need to go for it now, since next turn we could be dead to an Ironcrag Feet. And then we'll see if they were holding a Spikefield Hazard all along. And yep, there it is. So that fizzles, and now it's going to take us at least 2 more turns to set up a lethal minion. There's Ironcrag Feet, and there's the Charbelcher activate, and that's going to kill us on the spot. So yeah, our suspicions were correct. The only thing I think we could have done different is our mulligan decision, kept an extra land instead of Giant Growth. That might have worked out better. But I think that's only speaking with hindsight. I think it was still the correct decision. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Let's take a mulligan. And this seems like a keep. We've got Terror as our finisher, so shouldn't need Old Gnawbone. 2 lands, Giant Growth, Reckless Charge. And I think I'm committing a minion on turn 1 here. So next turn we could already kill. Let's see if our opponent has removal. Hand Disruption could also save them. Mountain untapped is bad news, but a Ringleader is fine. So our opponent on red aggro. And the creature-heavy builds typically don't have many burn spells. Maybe a Bone Crusher Giant to stomp, and then there's a Goblin Chain Warlord to maybe deal 1 damage. But yeah, this is a turn 2 kill, pretty clean one at that. And Terror is our better finisher in most circumstances. So there we have it. 10 games playing Minion of the Mighty. and I believe we lost 2 of them, so overall, pretty consistent deck, and almost to a worrying degree. Now, this deck never works in a best of 3 environment, since the mulligans are going to be a lot rougher. The opponent can just make sure they draw into a spot removal spell for your minion, and once the surprise factor is gone after game 1, then at least they'll be better prepared to deal with the combo. But in a best of 1 setting, then you've got that surprise factor, and you can certainly catch some opponents off guard. If our opponent is potentially packing burn spells, we might have to play it slow, and as we saw against the Charbelcher deck, sometimes all it takes is a Spike-filled Hazard to kill minion in response to a pump spell. But overall, a deck that's much better than I gave it credit for, so great for doing your dailies, but apparently good enough to rank up in the ladder as well. So that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.